So again, today's topic, candidate submittals in CATS. The little blurb that we had sort of leading up to today was talking about the candidate workflow. So if CATS is one feature, honestly, it's the ability to walk candidates through those different steps in your workflow and have them go through the different stages and the ability to, do things, which is, I know, is a super technical term, but the ability to, send those emails out, the ability to, send text messages, communicate, create calendar events, that type of thing, and also the ability to submit candidates, either to hiring managers or to what we call contacts or clients within your system. So when we talk about some of those things, first off, we'll just talk about adding that submittal trigger to your workflow. And in doing so, we're going to run into a couple differences with sort of the versions of CATS that are out there. So in some aspects, we're going to see submitting candidates to contacts or clients. We're also going to cover submitting candidates to hiring managers. We're going to talk about what the difference of those are and sort of what your ability to do the submittal is as well. So once we kind of break that down, creating the triggers, setting them up, we're going to talk about the submittal process itself. So, how do you submit the candidate and to whom is it going? There's definitely instances where you can submit a candidate for review to one person or to multiple. And so it's kind of how to manage and view that process along the way. Then we're going to talk about what the reviewer sees. Okay, so we're going to put our hiring manager hat on, if you will, and we're going to sort of be the person that receives that candidate submittal. We're going to look at what they can see, what they can do. And then we're going to hop back over into your shoes, into the recruiter shoes, where, okay, here's the results, here's what that person said in CATS. Then we'll kind of talk about then what, sort of the post-submittal, what kind of things can CATS do based off of when that review comes back through. So I touched on it kind of in that first bullet point, and what we're going to talk about here, and the first thing I'm going to show is submit to a contact or submit to a client. You'll see the language kind of used interchangeably in the agency/recruiter version of CATS. Honestly, the easiest way to tell what version you're on, if you have contacts as a record type within CATS, you're on the agency/recruiter version. There's a pretty good majority of the people that are using CATS are on that, so that's where we're going to start. My HR folks, my hiring manager submittal people, we're going to get to you, but we're just going to sort of repeat. We're going to start the process and sort of go through it with the contact submittal. It's very, very, very similar to the process of submitting to a hiring manager. So you're going to see a lot of overlapping stuff. So there are things, a majority of the things we're going to talk about are going to apply to you. But again, first we're going to talk about submitting a candidate to a contact. We're going to go through that process, and then we'll kind of start over in the HR version of CATS, and we'll talk about submitting to a hiring manager. So quick review on the contacts. They don't have a login. They don't have a user seat. These are just kind of folks that you have in your system as part of like the CRM side of things, where typically we refer to them as your HR people, the people that you're submitting candidates to, obviously, which is what we're talking about today. Each submittal that goes through is a separate email. And that's going to contain any templated information that you sort of build out, as well as the resume, and that all appears on a unique page. And again, we're just kind of talking about this. We're going to show you here in just a second. There are scorecards, which is another sort of element in CATS. Contacts cannot be sent a scorecard as part of the review process. But the nice thing about those contacts is there's no limit to the number of contact records that you can have within CATS. And again, if you're on the agency version of CATS, that is what we're looking at. All right, so I'm going to change the sharing here, and I would much rather show while I tell. And that's what we're gonna hop into now. Beautiful. Okay, now we're back into CATS. Now I can actually show you what we're doing here. So again, the workflow being one of the most sort of pivotal features that CAT's going to offer. As a site admin, I'm going to go over here to administration, and I'm going to go to workflow. And for this example, we're going to go with general, the one that's built in here. And again, these are all the steps in my hiring process. This can be completely customized. I can choose which statuses appear, where they are, what order they're in, what they're called, all that type of thing. But in this instance, I have a status right here called submit to client. And right now it doesn't do anything. So if I change a candidate to this status, it just kind of sits there, and that's fine. But we're talking about submitting submitting candidates today. So if I hit the plus sign over here in this row for this status, I'm going to add a trigger specifically for submit to client. Now, a couple things that can happen here. I can change the required settings. I can change, to whom the email comes from. But what we're going to focus on for now, there's kind of two parts where you can include information on the candidate. One is going to be right here in the email body. So you can build out, this is just sort of a general template that comes with that candidate submittal. That's going to include their name. That's going to include the job that they're being submitted for. And again, the location, the key skills, the desired pay, that's just sort of built in there by default. You can use any field in CATS, either on the job, either on the candidate, and you can include that in this email that comes through. And so this is a really good place to sort of click and drag. I've got all these different sort of tags over here. So if I want to build out a template that contains, again, any information I would want to, I can include that in the email body that goes out as part of that submittal. And I hate to skip over this, but this is very important down here at the bottom as well. Essentially, what this is saying is, again, picture the candidate being submitted to a contact. They're doing their review. They hit approve or they hit decline, which I'm going to show you guys. What can happen is you can choose a different status in your workflow that you can set the candidate to based off of what that decision is. We're going to go back and we're going to talk about that, but just as we're kind of building that trigger and setting it up, when you see approved status blank, decline status blank, that's kind of where that comes through. All right, so let's go ahead and add that. So submit to client, I am going to add a submit to client trigger. And here's the information I'm going to include. And for now, we're just going to say approved. We're just going to leave it in the same status. We'll manually move that candidate forward once a decision is made. So we'll go ahead and add it. And so now I'm going to go over to, I've got a digital marketing specialist role selected here. And Jeff, I hope you like digital marketing because you're going to be submitted for this role a lot today, based on the work I've done here so far. So for this job, I'm looking at my pipeline, and I don't have them in here yet, actually. So I'm going to hop over to Jeff's profile. I'm going to add him. Do a quick refresh here. Go down to my job section, and I am going to add Jeff to the digital marketing specialist role that I'm working on. In doing so, I'm going to change his status from new candidate over to submit to client. Now, this box that I'm checking is part of that permissions. setting that you saw when I was building that trigger out. Right now it's set to optional off by default. If it were set to optional on by default, that box would already be checked. And you can kind of go from here. This is that email that I built out. Again, it's containing all that information based off of this candidate's profile. It's also going to include the resume. Now, who it's going to be sent to, there's a couple ways that you can do it. So by default, it's going to be blank. If I click that, it's going to give me a drop down, and it's going to say, okay, here are some different contacts that are in your system. So I can sort of choose on the fly which contact I want to send that to. And again, that's going to be with respect to the contact records that are in your system. Now, if I want to save a step, one thing that I can do, I'm going to hop around a little bit here. I'm going to go back to this digital marketing specialist, the job itself. Now, what I can do, every job in your system belongs to a company. This one happens to belong to 612 Software. At that company, I have my contacts. I'm just going to put myself in there as a point of contact for this job. And that's fine for organization's sake. If I want to see, who are my jobs or what jobs in my system belong to this contact, that type of thing. There's a number of things that you can do to sort of organize and search and sort and filter your jobs based off of that contact. But one of the other things that you can do, so now that that job has been assigned to a contact, as I'm walking my candidates through the workflow, I'm going to do the same thing I did before, submit to client. My name is automatically populated in there, or that contact rather is automatically populated into the to field. So again, that's going to save me having to go and dig that person up each time I want to do the candidate submittal. If I tell CATS, this job belongs to this person at this company, when I do the submittal, their name will automatically be in that to field. Now, if I want to submit to a team, if I want to submit to more than one person, I can start adding additional contacts from here. So if I want to submit it to Zach and I want to submit it to Taylor, I can do that. In doing so, you're going to get some additional information that pops up down here. So the idea is, again, we're submitting a contact or submitting a candidate for approval. We're going to send this information out here. We're going to send their resume, and we're looking for an approve or a decline, as well as some notes from the contacts that we're submitting the candidate to. If I'm submitting a candidate to more than one person, I can tell the system, okay, in order for this candidate to move forward, of these two people, do I just need one of them to approve? Or do both need to approve for me to move forward? And that's where I can kind of choose here. And I can start adding more and more people here if I want to, right? Same concept. I'm going to submit this candidate in this instance to 3 different people, but as soon as one of them approves, boom, we're going to move forward if I have this box selected. As opposed to if I have all clients, once Zach approves, once Taylor approves, that person's still going to be in a holding pattern until Jeff approves as well. Or if one of them declines, then the whole thing kind of, that person's not going to move forward. And you're going to be able to see all that. That's part of the submittal process that we're going to go over as well. But let's walk before we crawl. Let's walk before we run, right? Let's just submit to one contact for now. Yep, looks good. Gonna hit save. And now we start to get into the whole, let's move around to a bunch of different windows, that type of thing. So bear with me here. So now I have received an email as the contact, and this is basically just what we set up before, right? This is basically the email that was sent through. Here's the subject line. Here's the body of the email that all comes through. And this was sent to me as the hiring manager, or as the contact in this case. And I've got a link right here to review the candidate. So I'm going to click that. That's going to take me to a special page, sort of just for that review. Here's the candidate's resume that was also included as part of that submittal. And here's where I can say, looks good. Let's move forward. And Jeff, you are approved. Congrats. Again, it's not super complicated, but that's the idea. You're going to give the resume, the email template, send it out to a contact at one of the companies maybe that you're hiring for, and you're going to get their feedback that way. So now I'm going to move back over into CATS. All right, and as that review process goes through, actually I should have paused it for a second while that review was taking place, but same kind of concept. So on the candidate profile itself, I've got this client review section right here. So while that's pending, it's just going to be sort of like a blue icon with a white dash in it that says, okay, we're pending review here. But now I can see this candidate was submitted to client at this date. This is the contact that reviewed them. This was the decision that they made. And if I want to see the notes that they left, I've got an icon right here. When I click that, here we go. Looks good. Let's move forward. And that's kind of where it ends for now, because again, in our workflow, we set up that trigger to say, if the candidate approves, none. So we're just going to leave them at that status for now. I'm going to get an email as the person that submitted the candidate that says, hey, your reviewer approved the candidate. Go ahead and click here to go into CATS and start to take action from there. But without setting anything up at the bottom of that trigger sort of screen, that's sort of where it stops. You're going to see obviously everything logged within their feed. You're going to see the feedback that's left here, but they're not going to move forward in any status or anything like that unless you set that up within your workflow settings, your trigger settings. All right, so that is, again, at a very basic level, how to create the trigger and how to submit a candidate, what the reviewer sees, and then once that review is made, kind of how it looks in CATS for the agency version, for the recruiter version, for the submit to client, for the submit to contact trigger. I'm going to pause. And we're going to hop over into the HR version of CATS. So those of you that are working with hiring manager users, this is how you're going to do the setup. This is how you're going to work your process. So one moment here. All right, just a quick review on the hiring managers. So those user types are included in the HR version of CATS. So if you're doing direct hires, internal, that type of thing, that's likely the version that you're on. The hiring manager has a unique login and dashboard, and that creates kind of a centralized location for submitted candidates. Hiring managers aren't able to get into your system and view anything as a whole. Basically, they exist for this review process. They can only view candidates sent to them for review, both outstanding and previously reviewed. They can be sent a scorecard as part of the review process. I would love to talk about scorecards. We do not have time to combine that with what we're talking about today, but that's our topic for next month is scorecards. So stick around for that. 5 hiring managers can be added per each full user within your system at no cost. We talked about hiring managers in depth. I think it was 2 months ago. And so we do have a pre-recorded webinar on that. So if you have any specific questions there, always feel free to ask myself, ask Jeff, ask our support team, but we do have a pretty drawn out video that you can watch that talks about all the details with hiring managers as well. So again, just kind of quick review here as far as what they do in the system. Okay, so now we're hopping over into HR. So this is, as opposed to submit to a contact, as opposed to submit to a client, this is going to be submit to a hiring manager. And here's how that's going to work. So again, as an admin user, I can come over here to administration, and we're going to go to workflow, and we'll stick with general for now. And again, I just happen to have a submit to hiring manager trigger that's been added, or a status rather, that's been added here. Really easy to add one if I don't. Just hit add status, name it, give it a color if you want, and it'll appear there. So same kind of concept over here on the right. On submit to hiring manager, I'm going to hit the plus sign. And in the action, I'm going to choose submit to hiring manager. And then we kind of talked about those required. This one I'm going to change to optional on by default. That's fine. The from, just the same as before. The reviewers section is kind of a fun one as well. So this is one that you can absolutely leave blank. And you can choose, again, who you're going to send that to on the fly. Or you can kind of do the same thing like we did in the other version where you have a contact that's assigned to a job. What you can do in this version is, and again, this is a couple steps, and myself, Jeff, our support team, anyone is absolutely happy to help you with this step. What you're going to want to do is create a custom field on your jobs that the type is CATS user. So I can create a custom field. The data type is job. The field type is user. And you can call it hiring manager. Now that's already been created. You can see it right here. With that in place, what I can do is go to a job. And as I'm editing it, I can assign a specific hiring manager. Let's go with Taylor here as the assigned hiring manager for that job. And we're kind of doing exactly what we did before, where when I am creating that workflows trigger, I'm saying, okay, who's it going to go to? If I have a hiring manager assigned to that job, let's have them selected and entered into that to field. The difference here too is in this HR version, I can actually choose a specific hiring manager for every single submittal that goes out, regardless of the company, that type of thing. I can just, kind of throw their name in here, and there they go. So I can do a combination. Again, it's there's a little bit more flexibility in terms of which hiring manager do you want to send that review. So I'm gonna close everything out of here for now. We're gonna go ahead and just choose this on the fly. Again, the email template is there for you to build out, include any tags, any fields that you would want to include in that submittal. We can also choose, okay, if they approved, what status do we want to send them to? If they decline, what status do we want to send them to? And for this one, let's do something like this. We're going to go ahead and say approved status. We're going to send them to first interview. For decline status, we're going to set them to not in consideration. And we'll add the trigger. And now let's go through the steps like we did before. So I'm going to hop over to Jeff's candidate profile here. And I don't believe he's currently in the running for a digital marketing specialist. So let's change that. Let's put him in the pipeline. And I'm going to go ahead and change Jeff's status to submit to hiring manager. And let's go ahead and move forward with that. And again, pretty much the same concept here. When I was creating that trigger, I didn't choose anybody. So I'm gonna have to choose that on the fly in this instance. So let's go ahead and send it to me as a hiring manager. Again, this is a hiring manager user that's in my system that I've gone in, I've created, they already exist. And I've got a resume attached here. Let's say I also want to include a cover letter that's on his profile. I can hit more over here and sort of check the box from here. And it's very similar to what we did before. Let's go ahead and hit save. And we're good there. Now we get to kind of hop around to a bunch of different windows once again, so bear with me here for a moment. Okay, so now we're putting on our hiring manager hat. I'm back in my email. I received this email that says, hey, please consider Jeff for the digital marketing specialist position. And again, anything that I have templated out is going to appear in this email body here. The difference is now I'm a hiring manager. I have a unique login. I have a dashboard that I can go and view some of this information. And again, going to do a little bit of hopping around here, so bear with me. But we will pretend that I just clicked that link in the email. What I'm doing is hopping around to a different browser so I can sort of be different users and cats at a different time. So just one moment here. Okay, so now I'm a hiring manager. Now I click the link, I'm logging in, and here's the review for Jeff. Here's the resume, here's the job that they applied for. And here's a link where I can download/view any other attachments that would be included as part of that submittal. Now, while this is pending, I didn't show you this last time because I went ahead and went forward with the review. So let's hop back over into Jeff's profile. And while I'm looking at his profile here, there is going to be a hiring manager reviews section. So you can actually see that right here. This is pending. You've got a little pending icon that shows right here. Let's say that's sitting there for a while. What I can do if I hit the little, is that like a megaphone icon? I can actually send a reminder email to that hiring manager that says, hey, poke, poke, poke. I submitted this candidate to you. You know, what's up? Still awaiting your feedback. Not super noteworthy, but it's not something I showed last time. So I wanted to throw that out there. All right, so let's go back to the hiring manager view. And in this instance, you know, again, this is sort of the review portion, but because I'm a hiring manager, at any point I can sort of check out my dashboard too, right? Here's any jobs that are pending approval. Here's any candidates that are pending approval, Jeff being one of those. I can also go back if I click on the candidates tab up here and sort of review any other candidates that were sent to me, as well as, you know, a little bit of their history, what my decision was, that type of thing. So again, another difference between the hiring manager and the client or contact through that submittal process. All right, so I'm gonna hop back to the dashboard and we are gonna look at Jeff, and we're saying, you know what, in this case, not enough marketing experience. Sorry, Jeff, we're gonna hit decline. And again, as the hiring manager, I can go back and I can actually see that, you know, Jeff right here was declined. And if I go back over into CATS, I will refresh the page. A couple things are happening on Jeff's profile now. One, as we mentioned, in that hiring manager review section, I can see that Zach HM is the name of that user, was declined. I click the sort of book icon here, I can view the notes. And because in that workflow trigger setup for this particular submittal, I made it say, okay, if a candidate, if the candidate is declined by the hiring manager, we're going to move them into not in consideration for their status. So you can automatically see that Jeff has been moved into not in consideration for the digital marketing specialist role. And that's where a lot of that automation can start to happen. So I can submit a candidate to multiple hiring managers. I can tell the system, hey, if one of them approves it, we're going to go ahead and move forward, or nope, let's go ahead and make sure all of them approve before we can move forward. If the candidate is approved, let's move them to this status. If the candidate declines, let's move them to this status. Again, that's all sort of set up on this page here. And then let's say they approve. I'm going to move them to a status, and then I can send out an email to the client. I can send out an email to the candidate that says, hey, looks like, you know, we're moving you on to the next step. Go ahead and, you know, let me know what times work for you for an interview. Or maybe it sends out a text, or maybe it does both. We want to, you know, cover all our bases to make sure this person knows that, hey, we got next steps, you know, let's move forward here. Or maybe it's the opposite, right? Maybe the candidate gets declined, automatically we're going to move them into not in consideration. And then what that does is it sends a rejection letter to the candidate. Maybe it's the next day, 2 days later, 3 days later, whatever, at 9 o'clock in the morning. So that's automatically going to go out there as well. And again, this is where a lot of the customization happens. This is where a lot of the time savers, you know, we're not going to completely take the recruitment process out of your hands, of course, but little things that you can do to save clicks, you know, save some of those repetitive things that you do throughout the day are going to save a lot of time in the long run. That's what we hope the workflow and some of the submittal process does for you here. All right, had a few questions come through. Jeff, thanks for answering those. I'm going to pause for just a moment here. If you guys have been saving any of those for the end, now's the time. Go ahead and type them through, and we will answer those here momentarily. Thanks. All right, so Katrina had a good question. What happens when one hiring manager approves and the other declines? In a scenario, right, where we're submitting it to multiple candidates. Basically what happens is, again, as you're setting that up, so let's go back to the submittal step here. And this is going to take a little bit of moving around. But essentially, if you're in a scenario where approval is needed by all of the reviewers, as soon as one declines, that candidate is already moved into a the review sort of ends. The review process sort of ends, and if you have them set to go to a certain status, if they're declined, that's what it'll do. So the actual review link, again, is the whole process sort of breaks down once a candidate is declined. If you're in a scenario where you would need them to be approved by all of the parties that they've been submitted to. Which is sort of the distinction that you'll see when it comes up right here. All right. Cool. Well, we're coming right about on time here. If there's any other questions, feel free to throw them my way now. Just a couple reminders here as if not, if we start to wrap up. There are resources online abound as far as setting these things up, adding those workflow triggers, walking you through the submittal process. A lot of it starts by hitting this question mark button in CATS. Check out the knowledge base. If I type in workflow, there's a great breakdown here on how to add statuses, how to add those triggers. It'll link over to the videos that we have set up on how to do that type of thing. In addition to that, if you haven't yet, I highly recommend checking out not only just this quick little set of training videos that are linked within the software, but if you just go to our YouTube page in general, you'll see some playlists set up. One's for administrator training, one sort of that general training videos, and again, another one is the recorded webinars, kind of that we're looking at here. And so I talked about hiring managers before. Here's 43 minutes specifically on adding hiring managers to your system, how to utilize them. We talked about workflow. Here's 33 minutes specifically on how to customize your workflow in CATS. And so, by no means is all of this required watching. And it's one of the nice things about CATS is there's a lot of features, but not necessarily all of them are going to be applicable to all of our customers. Different people use the software in different ways, and that's totally fine. But if you ever want to hop in and do a deep dive on some of these topics, they're absolutely there for you. And this video will be another one of those here in a couple days. So I highly recommend going and checking those out. And then, it's impossible to cover every single scenario. So by all means, email our support team. If you want to hop on a call, we can usually do that same day. And if you've got just sort of a list and, a phone call isn't necessarily going to cover it, or let's say, you've got your team in check and you want to do kind of like a group training, again, hit that question mark, request training. That's going to get over to me and I'll get back to you with some times and then we can get set something up as well. No charge for any of that. I want to make sure that everyone that's using CATS is knowledgeable and kind of knows their way around the system as much as possible. So by all means, reach out. There's lots of resources, both in video and knowledge-based form, as well as people to talk to, should you have any questions along the way.